Good day, everyone. This is Brother Lyles and minding my business. And I wanted to come outside today to do this video. Um, the significance of mental health um, amongst the black community is something that um, what we are going through right now with the revisitation upon our community with the lynchings that are being reported in the news, and also the rise of the alt-right, Christian right, and also the increasing call for black people, African American people, to participate in the immigration protest, which we are not, is definitely having an effect on many of our people, even if they don't speak about it. I think about this government shutdown, of which I have stated to you in previous videos that I am now a retired Veterans Administration employee. Started in 2009 and retired here in 2025 at the beginning of the year. Um, just as Donald Trump was starting his second presidency, as many people have uh, seen with a lot of the uh, furloughs and a lot of the firings of federal employees, that many have seen this as a concerted effort to deplete the federal and state and local governments of black uh, workers, because um, historically that field, the government, state, local, federal, has been a refuge for black people, African American people, whereas if they tried to start their own businesses in their own communities independent of um, white society, we've seen with Rosewood, Greenwood, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, being burnt down, so we could kind of uh, always lean on the federal government as somewhat of a safe place for us to uh, gain employment, be able to keep it on into retirement with a pension. That's why you seen after the Civil War, uh, there was a big segment of our black men that joined, remained or joined the Union Army, the Buffalo Soldiers to be exact, that many stayed on into their retirement if they could make it there, and also in Washington, D.C. and other state and local governments where we could maybe start out in entry level positions. And I even had a friend of mine who said that, at one time, like the maintenance in Washington, D.C. of the White House and stuff like that, like painting, carpentry, plumbing, they had, those were federal jobs, federal positions, that he said that one of his relatives, I want to say it was his grandfather or great grandfather, I can't remember which, that actually retired as a painter in the White House. And of course, you remember the movie talking about the black man that was a butler in the White House. I think Forrest Whitaker played that part very well. These were federal jobs, but with the Trump coming in and basically really starting to gut the federal workforce, a lot of our people have been and are going to be affected by this, and this causes again the mental situations that we're going on. Now I do have a ministry channel that I will, sometimes do go into the aspects of the spiritual, but this is for those that might not um, always, you know, have that going on in their life, at least right now. It still does not negate that there are ways to um, help yourself with the challenges mentally. Now, I've had great discussions with friends, family, my wife, my brothers about the past situations in the black community where we would never have the discussion about the mental, because of course we didn't have the access to those type of resources for psychologists, uh, psychiatrists, and things like that, unless you was insane, and then they would put you into a sanitarium or something in a padded cell with a straitjacket on, or lobotomize you or something like that, which kind of was the really the treatment for everybody. But I'm saying ourselves, um, that was the extent to maybe what a lot of us had. It was almost like it was not a uh, what's that word I'm looking for? It was not a reality to us, because it was, hey, this is what it is. I don't have time to be depressed. I don't have time to be, um, you know, uh, going and getting diagnosis of this, that, and another. Um, Not to say that none of us did, but I'm saying the large segment of black people uh, probably, and some still do, dealt with the mental issues through alcohol. And of course, when many of us migrated to the northern regions of America, and the introduction of drugs, illicit drugs, marijuana, uh, um, heroin, cocaine, and everything, um, which is not the way that you should deal with it. That was kind of the way we kind of dealt with it, and even in later years with crack, and now you got fentanyl, that's out there on the streets, um, which sometimes himself will bring on mental issues itself, that a lot of our people say, I'd rather be known as one that is on street drugs than one that will be on some kind of mental medication. I would say that we really got to take this thing uh, to the level of severity that it is affecting our people, whether you deal with it spiritually or you deal with it through psychological counseling, or medication, if you will. Um, I'm, I mean, I can just give you my, journey of how I was able to uh, really come back from dealing with PTSD, anxiety, um, from my time in the military, from combat, um, injuries, separation from my family, my wife and sons, the pressures of being a father, and all these different things, and also the things that um, happened when I was growing up that was already working on me before I even joined the military, and also alcohol abuse, and also getting out there and uh, dealing with marijuana use, which has, in since I would say really since the especially the mid to late 60s, has almost unfortunately became a almost like a staple in the black community, as not quite really considered to be an illicit drug like cocaine and heroin, but it's just like a something to set your mood. But we have not understood the dangers of this drug called marijuana to our community. You know that has, I believe, caused um, some to it almost be a gateway drug for many to springboard into other things that are stronger, but also has its cause, I believe, have brought about um, mental issues, as we see the type of marijuana that was around when I was growing up, at least here in North Carolina, um, and really across the world. It was kind of across the world and across the United States. It's nothing like later years, way after you know, was delivered from that, and it's the potency and different things of it has got to such a level that, you know, I believe it's just as illicit as anything, but because of the stigmatism that it brought against black people kind of coalesced around it and say, hey, I mean, why are we being disproportionately incarcerated for marijuana use or marijuana sales, especially when the people was knowing that it was starting to be medically uh, used in the medical alternative medical community, for treatment of different mental issues, which, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a naturopathic doctor, but I would still say that, in my opinion, as one that grew up, um, you know, that did engage in marijuana use, that it never, for me, as I look back, it never enhanced anything about my life that made it any better. It only, masked the inadequacies and the difficulties it was as a young black man growing up in the United States. It made you maybe feel, when you was in a group with a lot of other people that was doing it, that hey, I'm hanging. But you know anybody of note that I have known that was doing marijuana that I knew, and that maybe I did smoke marijuana with, most of them that whose lives was able to get on track. Most of them don't, they stopped messing with it a long time ago. They came to understand that, life issues cannot be straightened out by substance. And I think um, it was a good thing when a lot more of um, our black people start getting into the mental health um, arena as social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed clinical social workers, things like that, mental health nurses, to be able to talk to um, and to help some of our people understand that this is something that you got to um, deal with, starting what is inside of your head and not what you putting in your body. Ultimately, yes, it is, being legalized marijuana and some other drugs like ayahuasca and LSD and other things by licensed uh, uh, people that are overseen by different states to help treat some people that have severe. Um, I won't get into it too deeply. What I believe you should be cautious of when you're dealing with these uh, different cures that people are saying. I would just say for myself, you have to a lot of times you got to confront the beginning of healing. For me, I believe is confronting the unpainful past things that might have help uh, hurt you growing up, some of the painful things that you deal with right now in your life, and maybe some of the things that you see in the future, that you might uh, say, if this is going to be a painful situation that I'm going in, I need to prepare myself mentally. I know growing up, our our parents, of course, they how they were treated by their parents. There was no talk about mental health or anything like that. So of course, when we grew up, how our parents they dealt with us, if we had different issues of, feeling sad or, you know, sometimes maybe just melancholy, they would just yell at you and say, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" Snap out of it or something like that. And also, the overemphasis of uh, corporal punishment, which though is needed, I believe, because I can say that growing up, it was times that I was punished by my mom or dad that probably I did need it, but then a lot of times that I was, sometimes as I look back, I don't think it would have been needed, in that it was probably something that I didn't do, but maybe they was just upset and they, just say, hey, all of y'all get in here. I'm just gonna deal with all of y'all. One, just really um, stuff that today kids would be carted off out of the house. But this is what they knew. They did the best they can. It doesn't excuse them. And yeah, some was not able to recover from uh, a lot of that. Um, I definitely had to analyze, once I got children, how I was done and I had to have a, definitely a happy medium, because then the swing of the pendulum came later when they said, children shouldn't, be disciplined at all. And I don't think that the swing of the pendulum there, definitely we have seen that has not been the answer. And so, it said growing up, a lot of times you just had to suck it up. A lot of times when stuff happened, like I said, where, one child would get in trouble and you might not even be around, but when they yelled, all y'all get in here, and you might not even know what was going on, and they just said, well, nobody don't know what's going on, I'm just gonna get all of y'all. And I'll be like, what? I wasn't even around. But that's, again, these different kind of things you had to deal with. And also just the racism, which was, at my time, my time was just, it was what it is. Seeing, Klan rallies across us being burnt in cornfields that were, maybe 4 or 5 miles from where you lived at, and seeing Confederate flags and different things like that, and hearing white people call, black people boy, being called boy yourself, or being called the N word, all these things that you just took upon you, which you shouldn't. This generation, because they came later, they can't quantify that, and they say, how could you have dealt with that? And it's just, it was what it was, but definitely did have an effect. It did have, because when you distrust, when you see a certain group of people through a certain lens, but then you're trying to figure out which ones is the good one, which ones is the bad ones. These cause different kinds of anguish, especially for, uh, you know, uh, the black Horatio Alger, young black men such as myself, that was, going out into the world in the early 1980s with Ronald Reagan reigniting the racial thing. Basically he was the, um, uh, Trump somewhat is of a, uh, carbon. I don't want to say, no, not a carbon copy. Somewhat of moving in this, some of the same shoes that Reagan moved in, because Reagan was the antithesis against, um, Jimmy Carter and the Democratic Party, that was, you know, promoting the social programs and different things like that to help black people and poor people. And then when Reagan came, just like Trump, he was, trying to cut, or reduce programs and different things that had been in place since Johnson had signed those bills in the 1960s to try to help, um, black people that were, uh, in poverty. And Reagan basically was saying the party is over. Whether or not you believe that was a good thing or a bad thing, it caused a lot of anxiety. And also, the job market was really not good with the triple down, economics that Reagan was, you know, trying to implement, where you believe you give these tax cuts, these tax breaks to the wealthy and the ultra wealthy, that the benefits will flow down eventually to those at the lower level, which we know, that is a failed, um, a policy. But again, that is its own pressure, um, and then you, um, you're going into the military. You understand that this is kind of a last ditch thing because it's hard to find a decent job. You're staying with your parents, and you as most young men, especially young black men back there, you want to have your own. So it was either that or um, selling drugs, because a lot of our people was almost um, giving up hope. That now that we are trying to get ourselves somewhat in a right direction, here comes Reagan, and he's using these terms are being thrown out about welfare queens, which it actually didn't start with our black women that they was talking about when they said welfare queens. It was Caucasian women, but somehow again it got put on us, and it was like, oh, I remember hearing black people back then in the 80s. There was like, oh, in fact they had a song. It was called Reaganomics. It was sort of like uh, one of those early rap songs, and he was seen as the boogeyman. He was seen as the one, just like Trump, that was sucking the hope out of black people. So again, here we dealing with that. You going in the military. Um, of course, there is no, you know, combat on the horizon. They had a few little skirmishes, whatever, in the 80s or whatever. But there is this thing of, hey, I gotta go in here, and because I don't want to get caught up in the prevailing push to go into illicit, illegal things, just sort of like what was going on, you seen in the 60s, or when you look at stuff like Bumpy Johnson, and looking at the thing of Denzel Washington, with that guy Frank, whatever his name was, that came out the Bumpy Johnson, that was pushing the heroin thing uh, in the black communities in the 60s and 70s. You didn't want to get caught up into that, even though it was fast money, but you wanted to try to do these things that was considered safe. Going in the military is somewhat safe, and then when you get in there, um, you understand that within that culture, military, it is its own pressure, even though it's peacetime, because you still do have to deal with somewhat of racism, trying to get promoted. Also, um, young men and women from the bigger cities, bigger than from where you came, that do still bring some of their habits with them into the military. One of which is uh, drug use, drug distribution, and you saying, man, um, not that when you was growing up, and not that in smaller southern cities it was not there, because it was there. I seen it. Like I said, growing up, yeah, I engaged in marijuana use, but when I went into the military, I was trying to clear my mind. I was trying to get get straight. I was trying to leave that alone. I was trying to cut down on the use of alcohol and different things that I had started, uh, you know, occasionally um, drinking and things like that before I joined the military. But because of the lack of funds or whatever, I wasn't doing it heavy like that. But once I got in the military and I had my, I was getting my own, um, my paycheck, and I had my own room. I had access to the kind of different things, um, and I was looking at a lot of the inadequacies of how I was dealing with the military, and myself not really making it work because of, you know, not dealing with myself on the inside right before I came in. That when I got in, and it just ballooned. It ballooned into something that excuse me. It ballooned into something that you know was not a good thing for me. The heavy alcohol use, abuse, and the heavy drug use, to the point that I did get in some trouble while I was in the military, and had to go through some programs and different things and test out or whatever to get my slate clean. And when it was time for my tour to end, my tour ended, but I still had the heavy alcohol use and heavy drug use that I was dealing with now that I was out. And it was just the divine intervention, that, after I got out, I decided to go back in because I couldn't find a job, and I realized, hey, if I stay out with all these issues, man, I'm gonna get caught up into some stuff that I don't want to, and I just rather go back in the military, not understanding that, hey, I had some really bad mental issues going on, uh, some of which I believe had, I definitely had before I went in, but definitely after I got in with the heavy drug use, it just ballooned. Um, but I went back in, and again, I could see the heavy drug use and alcohol use. But then, as I've stated on my ministry channel, I got saved. I got saved in April 1987. And although on a spiritual aspect, that did, stop the alcohol use, the drug use. One thing that I've found as a believer, that the Bible says that Paul in the Gospels say, I pray your whole mind, body, and spirit be in Jesus or Yeshua. That a lot of times, yes, having a relationship with Yah, the Father, through His Son Yeshua, Jesus, will help that. Will definitely with the spiritual, but the mental and the physical, you have to continue work on that one. You have to, because the Yah in His, through the Spirit, is not forcing you, so you can love Yah through His Son Yeshua. Love His Son. Be hear from the Spirit, but still have to deal with mental and physical issues that you got to deal with. And so I had to learn the hard way, because I was thinking, okay, now I'm in quote unquote God, I'm good. No, it's not. Still had to deal with those. But now you're not dealing with them using drugs and alcohol, but you're trying to deal with them using the quote unquote word. But if you're not really versed in that, as you grow as a believer, or you don't have people that's in your life that can help you translate what is in that word or in that life, or would be an example, which I didn't have, then it's gonna be hard and you struggle, because even a lot of times some of these things might be better handled by some people that might not necessarily be quote unquote in your spiritual circle, right? These are some things that really could have been better addressed by your mother, your father. But if you didn't have them, it could be a friend or a co-worker or someone like that. And especially when you was in the type of religion or whatever that I was in, and it was like they kind of cut you off from a lot of things. You didn't understand that you were dealing with a lot of mental issues, and a lot of times the quote unquote therapy, what might be, hey, I'm just excessively in church or excessively in prayer, and you live a very awkward life, because Paul said we're in this world, but we're not of this world. But he did also say to, like if you said if you're married, he said he that is married must think of the things of this world, how he gonna take care of his wife, his kids, and different things. So Paul seems to give a credence to, hey, you got to definitely have the connection in the horizontal between you and the Father, right? The vertical rather, but you spend more time here on the horizontal. So although you want your conduct to be definitely led by the Holy Spirit, and some things Holy Spirit is not gonna, of God is not gonna be forcing you, like, you need to marry this one, or you need to take this job, or you need to, some of these things that some of these churches, these religions get out here and tell you. He said, I pray your whole mind, body, and spirit, that the spirit does know the things of the body and the mind, but he, just like Paul, being educated on a horizontal about laws and different things like that, when he got in trouble, Paul, I ain't saying that he wasn't praying, but like in one time he got in trouble, he appealed to one of the centurions that, hey, I'm a Roman citizen, you can't just do me like this. That was on him. In that sense, it's nothing. It wasn't he was sitting around waiting for the Spirit to tell him, Paul, appeal as a Roman so that they won't kill you here in Jerusalem. No, Paul in his own mind, because he had educated himself. So these are some of the things that are having mental issues as black people, outside of your church, your lodge, or whatever you are in. You're going to try, of course you're going to try to get some people that's in mental health, that's not going to make, maybe say if you are a religious person, deny your faith in that sense, but maybe they have outlooks on and they have success stories that and strategies that they can help you unpack some of the things that It might be people in your assembly or your church or whatever that don't necessarily see that. Um, I noticed that you know, after like I said, I got um, you know, saved and all these different things, that I still was depressed. I was still I was having a hard time with relationships and different things like that, and inadequacies that I was like, why isn't this thing of religion helping me? Because again, this was something that I believe that was I needed to take active participation in, outside of only praying. Not that praying is only, but and it don't help, but to actively also engage. Why do you think you see in the Bible? And I know this is not supposed to be my ministry channel, but I have to throw some of this in here. But even Paul said, confess your faults one to another, right? Didn't have anything to do with Yah, his spirit, none of that. Say, y'all as two humans confess one to another. So what is counseling? A lot of times, but a lot of times people sitting there and just talking out different things, and without getting into a theological debate about it. I think that is one reason why Catholicism is a lot of times popular with a lot of people, and even increasingly some black people. A lot of people don't know, especially on the continent of Africa, it's a lot, it's millions upon millions of Catholic Africans over there, and here in America, because what you have the confessional where you go to the Father and confess all these different things and get it off your chest. Now, you understand, I'm not promoting Catholicism, but I'm just showing you how just being able to get certain things off. And we as black people growing up, not to say that sometimes I couldn't sit down and talk to my parents or whatever, but it might be a one-off thing, right? Or even maybe sometimes, but I'm talking about as getting into them, letting them know, you know why am I out here drinking hard, why am I out here smoking and whatever. It was just like, okay, well, they just picking up bad habits, but maybe not understanding, hey, maybe I should sit my son or daughter down and say, hey, what is going on here? What is it that is so depressing or so stressful for you as a teenager with a developing brain? That are you doing? And that's not to say that my mom or dad liked that, what I was doing, and that they was not maybe concerned a little bit, but it was seen as, okay, maybe this is how they dealing with trying to graduate from high school, deal with this job. Like I had a job, a little after school job, where I was working at this county garage, and I was the only black employee there. It was a job for high school students to make a little extra money, and I had to deal with a lot of racist white men, calling me the N word, calling me monkey, and I would be threatening to fight them, and calling them crackers and all this kind of stuff. Just dealing with that going. This is in high school. That's what I'm saying. But it was just like, hey, this is how we deal with it. All these different things, and also, growing up in a house of domestic violence and stuff. Which, like I said, you seen that. It was, unfortunately, it was a norm back then. That's why you didn't have this thing of women's shelters and all that kind of stuff. That stuff was, far and few between back then. It was a reason why a lot of black women were right for the feminist movement coming out of the 60s, because a lot of times they was not treated right. They had to deal with um, racism from white society, and then come on, and because they were women, to be treated badly by their boyfriends or husbands. And it was, hey, you can't go to your brother because he probably doing the same thing to his wife or girlfriend. You can't go to your father because he probably was doing the same thing to your mama, or doing the same thing. And so, as one look at the quote unquote strong, independent black woman today, back in my day, that was not the norm. That came along again, not just because of the denigration of the black family, because of all these different things came about, because either the black women might have been married, but as more resources and stuff came for them to be able to get out of bad relationship, bad marriages, bad whatever, they got out, because a lot of times their life would really be on the line. And you would even see where if some women fought back against men and even killed them, the law was like, boom, send them to jail. It don't matter, because we cannot have the precedent set that they're going against the society, that the man is in charge no matter what. So you can look at the Middle Eastern countries and talk about how bad they treat their women with burqas and all these different things. But back then, hey, most of the time, if you were going to see black women that would just remain single, and maybe they did have kids, maybe they didn't. They remain. It was because of the violence there. And that is, again, you as a young black man seeing that, now late in later years, we it's still there, definitely. But you do see, where obviously, yeah, you do have some strong quote unquote black women that are, have kind of flipped the script, not in a good way. Um, but then that all goes back to the mental. How are we dealing with that? How are we dealing with the mental part of that? And I'm taking this opportunity again to say, we reach out to, in your community, to the mental health professionals that are there. um, primarily try to deal with our counselors, our people, if you can. But getting back to my story of like I said, trying to deal with my mental health issues through the quote unquote black church, it was a no-go. We did, not to say that it's now that it is some black churches that don't have it, but even with that, a lot of people would deal with their pastors or different things, like a lot of them that were not licensed to be counselors, or what a lot of times. And what you would see a lot of times is, maybe sometimes they would share things that they definitely wouldn't uh, want anybody to know. And sometimes these pastors would take advantage of them, through abuse or whatever, or they would get certain things, information that was really whatever about abuse. And some of these pastors would tell them, hey, I'll go back to this one, and you would see where women would get counseling from pastors about certain things, and they would send them back into relationships where they was continuing to get abused, or it would end up getting killed or hurt real bad. And it was not a good thing. But also, you would have maybe where they would talk to people in confidence, and some maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally, when they might be teaching a lesson, they might be preaching, they might get back up and maybe not mention that person by name, but they might talk about their what these people had done or were doing in these sermons or teachings, and that would make people like, you betrayed my trust, and so that's why, um like I said, some of my experiences, with that, I would definitely, even sometimes, if your particular church or wherever would have people that were counselors on the staff, sometimes I would almost say it's still better maybe for you to pay out of your pocket and go to um a mental health professional on your own to work things out. I learned that a little too late in some instances, considering some of the things that me and my wife went through, that if I had probably really reached out to not just a mental health person, but also financial, because I was having financial issues too. That again, I was thinking, I'm in this church, or some of you might be in some different organizations that you might think is gonna, and that's not gonna be. You need to reach out to a mental health professional and try to get some help. And I would say, especially after coming from combat, I seen, I kind of knew that I was different when I came back from the combat zone. Uh, but again, not understanding, I'm thinking I'm praying harder, it's gonna do this or whatever, and then also some of the issues that I created in my own home because I was not addressing these inadequacies and different things in my life, that it caused a whole different uh, uh, pot of problems for me and my family, to the point that yeah, I think I did have, when I was in one deployment and was having some issues, I basically lost it and had a breakdown, and I got removed out of my position of leadership by my command. And an incident happened where they was trying to prosecute me and send me to federal prison, not because of something that I did, but because of something that these soldiers that was under my command did, and they held me responsible for what almost happened. Um, in a combat zone, they basically, I had uh, been the commander of relief for these different armed positions around our compound. And so the threat level, this was in Haiti in 1994, during that time, uh, they had told us the threat level had gone down and we wouldn't have to have any more armed positions around the airfield, and that I was to instruct all the personnel, all the soldiers, that when they came off of their guard duty that morning, that they were supposed to bring the weapons and all the rounds and turn them into the arms rooms, which I did. I did that. I did that the night during our duty, and in my final walk around that morning, I went to each and every position again and told them, don't forget to turn in your weapons and your rounds, which everyone did except this one point. This one point. And this deals with some racism, but I'm not going to get into that point. But what happened was, these two individuals, they left the weapon and the rounds on the point. And when the task force commander was going around to review the perimeter again, to make a sweep of it, and I guess you know, to issue out whatever instructions you're going. He found the weapon and the live rounds still remaining in position, and on the other side of the fence on the air outside of the airfield where we was at were Haitians that were always there looking for food and water, and he went livid because he was like, look, these Haitians could have crossed over the fence line, got the weapon, the rounds, and just lit us up. And so they blamed it on me because I was the commander of relief, even though I gave instructions, which everybody followed except for one position. Because, but that's not the crux of the thing that I want to can concentrate on. But I just wanted to show you that also added to the mental issues that I had already been on one combat tour previous to the one in Haiti. Had been on some other high profile deployments also in between that, and it was just all accumulating. And if I had known what I know now when I came from that first combat deployment, I should have went and seen a mental health professional, not the chaplain, but a mental health counselor. But because of the high tempo um, um, high tempo of the unit that I was in, and also especially being a leader, it was looked down upon in the military to seek mental health help, which I feared that it would ruin my career. And also, like I said, I never considered it. It never came in my mind that that's what I did. But yeah, um, that incident and many other things just added to my need to, say I need to get out the military. It's not working. But then when I got out, I fell into a really bad depression, and I fell into a state of backsliding, from my, but not that I didn't believe in God anymore or His Son or any of that, but I was just kind of like, I was depending on that to have solved all these issues that I had been dealing with. I was looking to that to solve my marital issues, my problems with my upbringing, my problems with the the effects of the drug abuse and all these different things, and the lack of good examples for me when I was growing up of what a family man should be, and also my lack of financial skills. And I fell into heavy drinking again, not drugs now, but heavy drinking. And uh, although I was able, to successfully find a job, and also we bought a home and everything. It was rough selling there for a while. Eventually, I did, find my bearings. I tried to repair my relationship with my my wife and my family, and all those different things. But again, when I started getting back into studying and all these things, the word or whatever, it still did not dawn on me, even though by that time I was out and I had started going to the VA, and I was trying to, uh, get my disability and everything from some of the combat injuries that I had sustained, and I knew that I was different, like being around people, crowds, and different things, and I got diagnosed later on with anxiety, and I said anxiety, yeah, I can see that or whatever, and but later on that was upgraded to PTSD, but because I had actually got a TBI, traumatic brain injury, while I was in combat in Somalia, which people wasn't even understanding what that was. They just say you got knocked out for a few minutes and whatever, but not understanding that my brain had been affected, and I was dealing with that on top of the mental issues that I already had, and then throw in the reemergence of the alcohol use or whatever. Um, but again, I still, I think they had introduced to me a program that the VA had for veterans to get counseling, but I was like, I don't need that, because again, I'm using that stinking thinking. But just some other issues came up, and what I did start to consider taking some medication, um, but when I took the medication, it didn't feel right to me, and I knew that I couldn't have functioned, and I needed to continue to take care of my household. So going through, I could see that I did need to do something different. So what I did, when I started, it was kind of quite by accident that, when American forces, global war on terror started after 9/11, and then later on after, the successful invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. But the stay-on forces had to deal with the roadside bombs, and these soldiers were starting to get these real bad concussions, and then they just, you know, renamed the concussions TBI, traumatic brain injuries. I started thinking about the situation that I had in Somalia, and I said, hey, that's what I had. I had these different things, and so then with that, I told the VA, and then that's when they started sending me to psychologists and parapsychologists, and they say, oh yeah, and then I started understanding that, and then I started, getting in there where I was talking to psychologists, and I started noticing how good it felt after I got out of those different sessions. But then because of job obligations and different things, I wasn't able to stay with it. But I did started understanding, hey man, this is something that I need to do. So then, when I also understood that I just didn't have, I started going to, it was called the vet center, the vet clinic, and the vet clinic is like these counselors and people that deal with not just combat veterans. They deal with any veterans, but primarily they try to they specialize in dealing with combat veterans that have seen and experienced different things. And one of my counselors there told me, he said, I see here that you got anxiety. He said, why didn't they grant you PTSD? I said, what's the difference? He said, it's a big difference. And so, of course, I went to the VA, and I got reevaluated, and they said anxiety and PTSD. And uh, that's when I started really investigating a lot of things, because to get to in order to get reevaluated for that, I had to write out so many different things that happened to me. And as I was writing, I felt it was cathartic to me. It was like a healing thing. And I started understanding that, hey, even if one did not have no religion or whatever, these things that I'm doing, just talking things out, writing things out, trying to straighten out some of the things that I dealt with growing up, because some of the psychiatrists that they ask you all these different things. I said I should have been doing this a long time ago, even when I was quote unquote in this religious thing called the Black church. And I started understanding, man, we as Black people, we got a lot of issues that can be solved by us just talking certain things out and being open about it or whatever, that can change things. And I remember um, uh, I got a really good uh, uh, counselor. He was really good, and I intensely went to that counseling for 2 straight years. I started out 2 sessions a month, because I was dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of stuff. And eventually, he said, I think you can cut down on the busy. He said, because I had told the counselor, and I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but I told when I first got there, I said, look, I've tried medication before. Well, no, let me take that back. He had tried to get me to get started on another different kind of medication, and he said, try it for 6 months while you're getting the counseling and see. And so I tried it for 6 months. But during that 6 months, I told him, I said, look, I'd rather, this stuff is not helping. I said the counseling sessions are helping more than anything. I want to deal with this during the counseling session. So I said that's why I did the two counseling sessions a month. And I did that, and then we cut it down to one. But then by the second year, he was so good that they started telling him, look, we need you to be a counselor, a counselor at the ER at night. And so that meant he had to cut down on his daytime counseling. So we kind of I got to sporadically go see him, but eventually I couldn't go to him no more, because they basically permanently. This is during the time when the VA was just being, and they still are, but it was being bombarded with all these veterans that was getting out, that was having the problem with TBIs, mental, all these different things, that was coming to the ER having problems, and the VA was having to address them right away, because they was having some guys that was coming to the VA and they couldn't get seen, and some of them was offing themselves right in the parking lot. So they had to have these counselors waiting right there, and he was, I don't want to say unfortunately for him, because I know he did tell me that it was stressful for him. He said, because hey, we as counselors had to have counselors, so that we getting bombarded with all these things. But that helped me, set me on the right road, in the right way of thinking about mental health issues. And I have been a advocate of it for a lot of people. I've been an advocate for it, in that I look back at me and my wife, our marriage at the beginning. I think it would have been more beneficial if we would have had at least 6 months to a year of professional counseling, marriage counseling, not from a pastor, not that the pastor there was not a, at the church that my wife was going to. I don't think it would have been a bad thing, but I'm talking about if we would have had that. I think a lot of things could have been a lot better. So I'm a big advocate with anyone. You know, at one time, I've never been ordained minister, so I never married anybody. But I always told people that, you know, that if I had, or if I was still, and I had got ordained in the ministry, that I wouldn't have married no one if they wouldn't have had at least 6 months to a year of marriage counseling. I'm talking about intense marriage counseling. I wouldn't I wouldn't put my name on that paper. Not to say that it's gonna put it's gonna prevent some things that happen, but I'm saying if you go in, I believe with the real intensive counselors, and the thing I like now with the technology is not all bad. There's a lot of counseling and stuff can be done over people's phone, whereas they might not be able to, just drop everything, leave their job and go. They can set up sessions, and people can be counselors from across the world, and you could get home at 9 o'clock at night from work, and it could be a counselor on another side of the world or whatever, and you can say, hey, okay, I want my counseling session 30 minutes, and sit there and talk with them over the phone or over the desktop or laptop computer or tablet. And that's the good thing about that. Some people need the face to face, so it just depends on the person. But I'm saying that's what I'm emphasizing to our people, because it helped me out. Now I'll have to be honest. I haven't been to a counselor in a long time, because like I said, that those 2 intensive years with Bill, I did try to go to other counselors after that. I did get started with the vet center, and you know but I didn't stick with it, because I think I had got to where I needed to be. um and I might even start thinking about maybe going to the vet center once a month, just to, whatever. But I would recommend that to anyone's, veterans, whoever you seeing, especially in the black community, um, a rise in us off in ourselves. Some now understand. I see some of these things where our people are being seen, you know, swinging from trees and different things, and that's really suspect to me, that we would kill ourselves. But that's not to say that we're not doing it. Besides that method, we are doing it. We are using other means to do these things to ourselves or harm ourselves, and we need to be out here. Of course, it all begins in trying to have a good, solid structure in the home, a healthy environment for um, not just the parents but the children also. But if you're a single mother and you whatever, I think that a lot of times that people are clamoring for EBT cards, clamoring for welfare checks and different things like that. And maybe if they would get the good counseling and different things that they need, they could get their minds together where they could, get off of the social programs, and get the schooling and different things, and get jobs. Businesses started, or get the job that they want, in order to not just get the job, but also put themselves in a position, if they're a single mother or just single by themselves, and maybe to be able to be healthy emotionally, mentally, to get the right kind of mate, and you wouldn't have all this. Because I'm a believer that when you're seeing all this body augmentation, the BBLs, the piercings in the eyes, the piercings in the nose, the tattooing, and all these different things all over the body. That is a cry from what's going on the inside, not just people mimicking popular culture, but that they got because a lot of times what are people uh, tattooing on themselves? Might be tattooing somebody's name that of significance to them, tattooing people's pictures on their bodies, or tattooing scriptures, something dealing with that inside, but it's not gonna deal with that longing. Not to mention that a lot of times people themselves have disturbances in their own life when they see people with that, with these piercings and all these different things. You can say it's wrong or not, but people are looking and saying, hey, that person probably got a lot of issues going on. If they got stuff all on their face all the way down to their body, they can be quote unquote as nice as they want to be, but you might be like, what are they behind closed doors if they got all that stuff going on? Hey, and that's why you see what the trans thing. What is a trans? You mutilating yourself. Why? Because you got issues going on that maybe not got resolved, and then confusion set in, or maybe you know, um, you know, institutional abuses in the foster care and adoption industry cause these to grow up and be confused, and you know, it can't be proven, so I can't say. But in my opinion, I even look at the situation with some of these NBA players whose sons turn out to be LGBTQ, and you find out somewhere along the line that they was maybe exposed to this stuff at an early age, or something happened that was not said, and but they make it seem like it was a normalized thing that they just up and say, hey, I want to be like this. I don't believe that. I really believe something happened and it caused a mental break, and either because they definitely didn't want to speak against that kind of thing, they just kind of leaned into it and say, hey, I'm going to lean into letting my uh, child go in that direction because, hey, this is more profitable. I don't want to be seen as one that's taking my child to some kind of therapy to get them out of the mindset of being something that is not natural. And so, unfortunately for that child, maybe later on they might wake up, but then what you really find out later on is most of them, especially those who they end up a lot of times offing themselves, because that is not, and that's also where you have to be careful with what counseling, mental health counseling. You got be leery of that, because all of them are not always gonna be sound. But I think they said you can find categories now where you can, hey, no, hey, this counselor, they're ones that tend to believe in maybe some of these alternative, what they call alternative lifestyles. So that's, if you I just use the word regular like me, you want to probably leave those type of counselors alone, because they might get you off into the beaten path, because they are expert, but they're expert in those that are leaning the wrong way, in my opinion. So you also got to take that in consideration. So I know I've been rambling now for over an hour, but I think this is so important that I get this out, because in this time period where we as black people here in this nation, with, like I said, the unemployment, and the even the thing in the military where they're gonna make it hard for black men to that have shaving problems to be able to stay in, which when I was in, I had problems shaving, but I think I was able to figure out a way to minimize the bumps and on me on my face, because after so much trial and error. But I used to have problems where I would have to grow my beard out, um but I was able to figure out a way. But I can see how that's gonna probably be a big impediment to some of our men going in, but also some of our women, where they're gonna probably go back to not letting them have their hair in certain ways that they was able to, or whatever. They probably go back to certain things that's gonna probably just turn a lot of our people off. And if the foundations be destroyed, government, military, or whatever, they're making it hard for you to get small businesses and stuff like that. And also the DEI thing, which we wasn't really benefiting from DEI like that anyway, but the little bit that we had, that's pretty much gone. You're gonna have a lot of even more mental health issues. So again, I'm telling you, get the help that you need. It really helped me, and really it kind of enhanced my understanding of Yah by thinking with a clear mind, as Paul said. I pray your whole mind, body, and spirit, right? And more clearer now that I got that in the spirit. It definitely, it definitely had a part in that, but you have to be the initiator a lot of times in that, and then he'll direct you where you need to be. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning in to the channel today. If you could please, as you leave the video, please give this video a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Please share and subscribe. Thank you.